Yes, today webinar is on drought and disaster management. And in this webinar, I welcome Dr. Chandrashekar Hariharan ji, a noted economist of the country and an expert on the subject. And the other expert speaker is Akash. He is a area convener and senior program manager of GRIHA. So these two people, and I also welcome our viewers of the YouTube and viewers of the Facebook, because they are present in good number, and always they encourage us by raising their number from one program to another program. Last program in which you came, Hariharan Shah, that was a very popular, means the maximum number of the viewers were there in your program. Hope that
Right.
today also they will be there. That is all because of that. So today's topic is drought and disaster is a very correlated. So if there is a drought or a heavy rainfall, then disaster comes. And Gandhiji was much concerned for drought and for the situation that he has also seen such situation in his life while doing movement for the freedom of the country. What he has said about the drought, that you should take only that much of water which comes in your share. Don't take water from of the other's share. If you are taking water from the other share, then you are causing drought. That is one of the responses. Then, because if you are taking additional water, more water, then you are exploiting nature and you are depriving your co-fellow. Your, that's what he said. And with his words, I would like to say that this is one of my book on disaster management, which was published long back, and it is a proceeding of an international conference of International Union of Anthropological and Ethnological Sciences. There, that we did in USA, Virginia. So that long back, sometime in 2003, there was one international congress, and on that platform we had, and this proceeding volume. This is the proceeding volume. This book we have discussed a lot about the nature of disaster and how the people are handling the disaster and all. Disaster is mainly broadly are of two types. One is the natural disaster, and the other one is the man-made disaster. So this drought is a natural disaster, and the train accident or the plane accident, all that we consider as a man-made disaster. So for natural disaster, we have developed some technology and some policy and some programs. But for this man-made disaster, you are not sure that which kind of things will happen. Maybe sometimes it varies in nature, but for natural disaster, we have a limited things to do. And so for that, today we are discussing the drought, which is part of the natural disaster. And the drought, you see, the drought is affecting too much. It is increasing day by day. Instead of development that are taking place in technology and in other things, in academics, on so many aspects of drug, but it is increasing and it is affecting more and more number of people. So that's of great concern for all the academicians and all the policy makers,
Mm.
how to check it, how to avoid it. That is the great concern for us. what to do and how to do. Because when this book was, my book, Disaster Management, was published, perhaps that was the first book, because there were two-page review and all that details published in the Indian Express and the Hindus and all that. But those days, this kind of book was very rare. But now we have a lot of books. The engineers, they have their own views, especially the civil engineers. They have their own view about the disaster. The irrigation engineers, they have their own view about the drought and all that. But generally, in our country, the drought is because of the nature. It's a natural phenomenon. Sometimes it becomes the man-made disaster. So, since it is affecting the uh, about three quarters of the population of the world. They are suffering. They get affected by the disaster somehow or other from this part of the globe or that part of the globe. Each year we are suffering. So if, it needs a prescriptive research and a prescriptive study how to support people in coming over from the problem of the drought. So for that, the management now, the disaster management is one of the subject in IIM and also in IIT, and where the economist has great role to play. Apart from the uh, engineers, and the policy makers, the academicians also have an important role to play. And this Mr. Akash, who is from the GRIHA housing expert, for him also the drought is equally important, because if there is a drought, how will he provide water to the inhabitants? So that is, I hope that he will make presentation from his own experiences and all that. So today's the flow of the webinar will be, the first of all, Professor Hariharan will make his presentation, and then Akashdeep ji will make his presentation. The maximum time that we are giving is 30 minutes, but you can 5 minutes, 10 minutes you can take time. After that, I will give some concluding remarks, and then there will be some. If there is some questions from the viewers, then we have to take those questions also. So with these words, I would like to request Professor Hariharan to make his presentation, make aware of what he think of the drought. And so,
thank you, Professor Narayan, and it's a privilege to know you, sir, for all the distinguished work you have done. And as you said, today there may be a profusion of such literature thanks to media and thanks to technology. But in the years that you pioneered such directions, there were not too many people who did it. And I often pay my tribute to such pioneers, for it's easily forgotten how difficult it must have been in your time to be doing what you did to produce such a book or to further thought and insights and perspectives of the kind that you did in those years. And since then, in the last, say, 30 years, namaskar to all of you, ladies and gentlemen who are present here, and to Akash Deepji, and thanks to Subhash and others in the team who made this happen. Over these last 30, 40 years, since those heydays of people like Professor Narayan, who drove certain very specific directions that the government of India could take, and district level watershed directorates could also be assuming, let us say, as responsibilities and roles and directions, we have seen not too much of a change in the way things happen on the ground. If I were to go back to say 1985 and looked at tehsils, I remember going in 1997, sorry, 1988 or 89, to Patan district in north of Gujarat. Then there is something called the NM Sadguru Foundation in Dahod district to the east of Gujarat, bordering Madhya Pradesh and Rajasthan. There is the Khan River there. And the Sadguru Foundation, which was founded in 1974, was also working on similar watershed challenges for farmers. If you look at a command area, as the government calls it, and if you go back to what Professor Narayan spoke about, of irrigation engineers and the insights that they offer, you will see that there is a difference in the way one perceives it if you come from the context of, shall we say, development economics and not simple engineering at the direct levels of execution or of planning. With that as a whatever initial note, I will add one proviso or a statutory warning, shall we say. Whatever I'm going to be sharing as reflections and thoughts with a set of slides that we will put up now are not new to anybody who has been working on watersheds. Any professional of watershed management who is in this meeting will find most of what I am talking about to be very well known. My idea of accepting Professor Narayan's gracious invitation to be present here today is to only remind ourselves of the challenge before us across our villages. If I may request Subhashji to, yeah, there you are. Thank you. Well, what Professor Narayan told me is this, that the Society for Environment has this series of conversations. They've had extremely distinguished people, including people like Arun Gandhi, who have had series of sessions here. And Professor Narayan has been putting together such webinars for the last 3 to 4 years now, tirelessly. I thought about it and I said to myself, we must talk about preparedness to such disasters. Disasters happen, and I will also share some thoughts on what this is about. If we can move to the next slide, please. Yeah. Whoever is on, can I do that myself? Yeah, there you are. Okay, I can do it myself. Thank you. Well, to anyone who has worked on it, let me remind you that there are 3 basic essential components of drought management. One is, how do I set up an early warning system? You know, the other kind of natural disaster that has just now happened to the west of India in Gujarat, and you know the tremendous damage that has taken place. And I shall talk about such natural disasters too. The second one is, how do we map, measure vulnerability in a tehsil, in a block, in a gram panchayat? Typically, let me remind all of you that if we talk of a gram panchayat in India, we are talking of an average of about 4,000 acres. We have 260,000 panchayats. We have 600,000 villages by whatever census that you have. So this is the average. We have, well, if I were to take 260,000 and did a simple arithmetic on 600,000 villages, then I know that there is only about 2.5. But in most parts of India, which have had administration, village administration for say 1,000 years, the Cholas, the Pallavas, for instance, here in these parts, the Guptas in certain parts of central India, Nagarjuna and others in towards Andhra, or for instance the Kutch area of Gujarat, of western Gujarat, you will see that typically you will have to a panchayat about 3, 4, 5 छानीज जो होते हैं ना, इंग्लिश में वैसे हैमलेट्स बुलाते हैं उनको, तो हर एक ग्राम पंचायत का वैसे एक गांव होता है और उसके अलावे देयर विल बी एटलीस्ट 4 or 5 thanis. Now, how do we create, therefore, for a gram panchayat a vulnerability and impact assessment depending upon the crop pattern there? The micro region's unique traits and characteristics is part of that challenge. Of course, when you talk preparedness, you have to talk also, okay, we know what the challenge is, how are we going to solve it? If I'm in a cotton growing area, cotton and let's say indigo, or cotton and some other intercrop, or I'm in some other area where it is, say, shall we say, it's rain fed, like Professor Narayan said, disasters are not simply about drought. Sometimes it's about a massive downpour which washes away your crop, right? Now, if I were to look at this, we have two types of, sorry, two types of definitions of a drought. This is very important for us to know this because, if I look at the Met officer, he is going to define it the way it is defined on the left side. If it is a regular agricultural drought, and if you talk to an extension officer at a district watershed directorate, he will talk from the context of the right side. So, how do you define this? And it's important because funds that have to come to a district level or to a tehsil level and then to a block or to the gram panchayat depends upon how this is defined. I'd like you to keep this in mind as we go ahead. So the other is, look at this. I keep telling people this is, yeah. Now, I will handle this myself. You don't have to change the slide, please, whoever is doing it from the host side, right? Sorry. Beyond droughts, these are the things that we have to bear in mind. That by 2030, clearly, already it's on in many places. For instance, the city that I inhabit, Bangalore, gets only about 48% to 45% of its water from the organized grid source of the Water Supply Board. Falling water tables is a severe challenge across the country in every district. We have, as you all know, about 750 plus districts. Everywhere we have this groundwater table challenge at 1,000 feet, 1,500 feet, and depending upon the kind of soil that you have, alluvial to in the Deccan Plateau, the type of soil that we have, the retention capacity of soils also have degraded very, very dramatically over the last, say, 30 years or 30, 40 years, let's say. Changing patterns. This is another challenge we have found. For a long time, until about 2015 or so, I used to always look at the 30-year rainfall pattern. No longer. In the last 4 or 5 years, there has been such dramatic shift in the number of rain days and the number of rain hours. We all know that we have about 8,640 rain hours, hours in a year, 8,640 hours. Now, you go to any part of India, drought or no drought, you go to even the heavier rainfall over 2000 areas like, say, Bombay or Kochi or Bangalore on the west coast, you will still find that they do not get any more than about 80 to 85 rain days, rain hours, 80 to 85 rain hours. The number of rain days, interestingly, since about 2015 has fallen. The number of rain hours has not increased as much as the intensity of rainfall has increased. What does that mean? It means that you're getting more rain than you can manage in a far shorter time or in a shorter time than you got for the last 1,000 years. If this was, say, 1014 or 1020 or 1025 AD, and let us say this was ruled by the Cholas, they built numbers of tanks in these parts. The same thing happened in Bengal. If you go to Bengal across, I'm saying unified Bengal, pre-1947 kind of Bengal, you'll see that the entire region was built with tanks and water bodies. In Rajasthan, this is a story we all know. However, the challenge today between now and 2050 is that the quantum of tanks that we need to have, storage capacities that we need to have across the country in its districts, depending upon the rainfall and the micro-region's traits and characteristics, has to be relooked very seriously. And that is also part of the drought mitigation measures. Discharge of rivers, we all know this, the quantum of water that rivers are taking are much, much less. And the dreary statistic that I have put up in red as the last 3 points, I don't need to tell you any more on that. India's per capita water availability is alarming. If many of you people here are either among policymakers or among people who are in the water fraternity of professionals working on water management, I will urge you all to understand that what we had in 1947 to now, it has become 75% less. And not simply because of the quantum of population, which has also risen 4 times, 380 million then to about 1,450 today, as millions go. keep that in mind as we talk further. And the next thing I want to show you is this. Okay, no, either I am moving slides too fast or somebody is doing it for me, and therefore I have to go back. Okay, let's start clockwise from building economic efficiency. To me, every single thing that you do in a village or in a city, does not matter, has to have economic efficiency built into it. Whole business of reliefs have to stop somewhere. I cannot be my brother's keeper. If there is a certain amount of money spent, there has to be accountability, and we shall discuss how such accountability can be brought in this template of action. The one that you see on the clockwise that build ecological strength is about how, if I were to take that same Gram Panchayat of say 4,000 acres, 3,800 acres, 4,300 acres, approximate I'm saying, how do I look at it first in terms of its existing produce profile, its water profile, people, average incomes, different types of incomes given the skills, and then see what I will do to build that nexus between economics and ecology. I'm not saying this is easy to do, but I'm also not saying that this is a daunting or difficult task. We have proven it in probably 14 to 15 such districts across India. In Tamil Nadu, right now we are working to the south of Hyderabad. We are mentoring, guiding one set of people who are looking at 25 Gram Panchayats. And we said, look, we'll look at 2 Gram Panchayats first, give you a pilot in a way that we demonstrate the outcomes and deliverables, and after which you can take that model further on to the other 23 panchayats. So we are talking at an average of 4,000, 25 is 100,000 acres of land that comes within that watershed, contiguous watershed. The third one that you can see on the right side is create local water infrastructure. Reduce your reliance on all this long distance water. You know, canals and irrigation, you all know 40% of our irrigation in this country on the 150 million hectares of land that are under cultivation, 40% of that is under canal irrigation or river fed irrigation. The rest of it, there is no river. In most cases, there is no water. There is 400 mm rainfall in many districts. That is where your greater vulnerability to droughts come. The last one is about how to define that village's own determined contributions. And that also means autonomy to the village. Shall we say more initiatives from within the village, and that cannot come without greater autonomy for the panchayat. Okay. Now, thank you. Oh, what happened? It's went somewhere else. Okay, 3 pillars. These 3 are about how, for example, the Gujarat disaster. To go back to what Professor Narayan said earlier, interestingly, he talked about man-made disasters, like the train disaster that happened recently in Odisha and so on. But in natural disasters, you have such disasters as the one that took place yesterday, and the DNA of such disasters is completely different. If it is an earthquake, for example, I was in 3 earthquakes, Bhuj, and before that Uttarkashi, and then later the one in Gulbarga and places like that. So the thing with earthquakes or with the kind of disaster we had last week and this week in Gujarat, there is a clear process that the government usually takes, the administration usually takes. In Odisha, they have been doing that. Of relief first, monies go. And you know what happens to such things. Medicines will go, food goes. There is no strength that is created for the long term with such relief monies. And the moment, say 2 months, 3 months from now, the headlines go out of the media front pages, the attention that is given to that area and the challenges of such natural disasters, I call it the other disasters, not drought, is also declines. The moment media's interest goes, there is not enough attention given, and therefore rehabilitation, or even worse, reconstruction, which is the real building of sinews and muscle of the communities or the microregions' ability to be prepared for another disaster, is not given enough attention to. Odisha is one example where they have done some very good work, I am told, and I have not had any personal first-hand experience of it. But we must, if other states learn from what Odisha has done, and if they have done some effective work, that will also ensure that the impact, economic, social, as well as ecological, of such natural disasters are minimized. You cannot avoid them. Japan has had this problem forever, but they have built a system which brings alert warnings and such things. And I'm not going to talk about what they have done. We'll go to the seventh, slide 7. I'll go to. Okay, you are moved. Bring it back to slide 7, please. I think we both are doing it. So one of you has to tell me that you will do it. Please, yeah. Now, will you do your audio? Open your audio and tell me that you will handle the slides. The host, please. If you tell me you will handle it, then I will stop handling it.
Sir, sir, it is at your end only. We are not handling it.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay. So now
Maybe you are moving
I
fast.
know. Maybe it's jumping, probably. I'll look at it. Now, if you look at this, look at the first one on the left, which is a regular other disaster. And the last one on the right is about droughts and disaster. When I talk droughts, like Professor Narayan said, we are also talking of times when we have massive floods, unexpected floods, which wipe out crops and such things. So agricultural or agricultural related natural disasters of that kind on the right column, right box, is different from the one that's on the left. The left one is very structural. Disaster management, ask anybody who has worked on NDMs, and he will tell you that it's easier to manage that. Not easier, it's a very different beast to handle if it is of the kind that Gujarat has today. But when it comes to these disasters, the people, if I were to try to make people understand the complexities of what you need to do to build such mitigative strengths within the community, they find it more difficult to accept because it's more conceptual. We have to talk about crop patterns, we have to talk about watershed, we have to talk about how we can build a lot more things within the lands, cultivable as well as the non-cultivable lands of the panchayat, of the Gram Panchayat. And therefore, it requires a great deal more training here at the community level, while in natural disasters, in earthquakes or in, the kind of things that we have had, tornadoes and stuff, what you need is a very different thing at the levels of administration, not at the levels of the community itself, being built to become more resilient. The center one is talking about reconstruction. Drought measures do not require reconstruction as part of process, but the other things need reconstruction. So if you go back to an earthquake or the kind of disaster of Gujarat of this week, you will need reconstruction, relief, rehabilitation, reconstruction. But here, you do not need reconstruction. This is a continuous process, as you will see. Now, okay, it jumps. Okay. So this is the typical reactive response. Unfortunately for us, Professor Narayan, with due respect to you also, I must say that our handling across many districts, if I were to look at the last, say, 20, 25 years that I have been personally tracking some of these things, I find that our response has always been reactive. I get a drought and I immediately want to see what I can do about it. I get journalists calling me at the beginning of a summer and saying, well, just now, maybe 10 days ago, I get a call from somebody who's saying, in Karnataka, certain districts are not having water to the north of Karnataka. What do you think should be the measures? I said, you do not talk about an immediate reactive sort of thing. We have to build it. And if the solutions have to be constructed, designed, and executed, you look for outcomes. You look for deliverables maybe 3 years from now. You cannot have a solution that will happen in, say, 3 weeks of a disaster, of a drought disaster, befalling a certain community or a certain district. All these I'm not going to read, but you can see what it is not providing when you give them relief money. You are not bringing any behavior change. You are not doing anything to change the way they manage their resources. You're not building their capacity to do things. The coping capacity is not built. And of course, we don't even understand these patterns in the beginning. There are no alert warnings. See, if I know, for example, that the Kharif crop this year is going to be bad in a certain district, I can then get the block extension officers, the district level officers, everybody to think about it, work on it in a certain way, uh, and alert the farmer or the collective of farmers to see that they take steps. This is not new. Like I said in the beginning, this is not new, but I'm just reminding all of you that this is what we should not be doing. Now, if I were to, okay, yeah, there you are. That right side, whatever graphic, my colleague put up here, just to tell you that if you were to, web search in 5 to 10 minutes, 15 minutes of some cursory search, you will find multiple things that people have said in the past. People like Professor Narayan said it 40 years ago. But when did you publish that book, Professor Narayan? Which year was that? That volume that you showed us of the proceedings? Okay, he will tell us.
2003. 2003.
2003, 20 years ago. Yeah. And the study must have reflected, patterns that he will have studied of the 1990s. And here we have had a dramatic change in the way climate profiles have, defined things for us in the last 2 decades now. Well, I'm not going to say more on this, but this is for you to know that we cannot do those reactive things. We have to look for proactive processes. Now, very quickly, creating coping capacity in communities. You know what this means. I've said it before. I'm again repeating this. Institutional capacity in panchayats doesn't exist today. If you go back to a 1980s panchayat, I remember sitting in Cuddalore district in 1 or 2 panchayats when they were working out their seeds and distribution of seeds to the farmers for the next crop. There was a certain traditional architecture of such dispensation when it came to riparian rights of water, for example. Caste, no caste, there is a certain way it has been handled in our panchayats all those years. There's been a very, I would say, maybe calculated, deliberate decimation of such architecture of water, thanks to politicization of panchayats and so on. I will leave it there. How do I therefore build community independence once again? How do I give it back to them? How do I give them autonomy? Is one of the questions you all should be asking. We all should be asking together. Here is all the communities you can get together. Communities are natural resource district at district levels. If you were to take even the village handbook, today you can get them at some 15 rupees or 20 rupees from any district office. If I were to take that and then understand who the players are, if I'm an NGO sitting in some district, and then I understand who I should call for these meetings, and if I can get them all to talk to each other, which is the biggest problem in the government, as you know. And then if I were to set some measures, get people who are professionals, who can do such measures, dashboards in a way that you can anticipate impacts way ahead of a drought. Well, climate change and threats, we all know, but point is, we must be able to put them up. Simple visuals in the local language, whatever the language is. I put it in the panchayat office, in the school, in various other buildings. That will make a difference for people. I only some another 5-6 minutes. Mitigative measures, I've said this before, but a community or a farmer is going to accept, a farmer family will accept, only if I am showing him also that any such mitigative measures will mean higher income for him. The Prime Minister announced some years ago this, doubling of farmer incomes and such. It's not that it's not possible, but how do I do that? Where do I get the execution of it done? Who are those people who will enable and not stand between, but be the linkage between the farmer and the doing of things? That means, getting people who are NGOs or with some training and background in such areas and so on. I'm not going to delve too much on that. But if you look at this, this one paragraph, and some of you who have possibly heard me the last time, you can possibly go back to that link which is available on the YouTube, as Professor Narayan said. This is the center. of anything that they want to do as mitigative measures if they want to build their resilience for any drought. In fact, the new water policy also talks about it, as I will show you in a moment. Uh, this is what it says: 75 lakes in every district, the Prime Minister has said 4 or 5 months ago, not long ago. And if I were to take, see, I'm leaving out certain hill districts, and therefore I write 750 districts here, though you and I know we have about 760 plus districts. If I were to take even 650 districts at 75, I'm talking about 60,000 lakes. 60,000 lakes. India has never built as many, if I were to take the last 1,000 years, right? The Prime Minister again has said this: catch the rain where it falls, when it falls. We all know this. Anybody who has worked on water for even, say, 5-6 years knows this as the basic, wisdom and insight that we all need to carry as practitioners. Rooftop rainwash, how do I now demonstrate that in each of the villages, make the community understand what it means, make them understand how much water we got, how the community's water requirement can be met with rainwater itself, instead of them drinking water that is poisoned by fertilizers and pesticides. A village in east of Coimbatore, about 40 kilometers from there, came to me some time ago, and they said, we want to see what you can do to give us clean drinking water. I said, so where is the problem? And then when I began to understand that over the last, say, 10 to 15 years, they have been pumping their soils with synthetic fertilizers and pesticides, I began to realize where the problem was. And the effort now is to see how we take them away from such petroleum-based fertilizers. The government has been candid in its assessments. You must read. I put up that link. Anyone who wants me to send that link to you, I'm happy to send it to you. The government is, for the first time in the new water policy, completely candid. You know how politics can work. They would not want to say such things. In fact, the Prime Minister, in a meeting in Bombay, must have been about 4 months ago, in a public address, he said that more than national security, water security is important for India today. Now, it takes a lot of courage for a politician, although he is the Prime Minister of India, to be saying such a thing, that defense or national security is not as important as water security currently for India. So how do you prepare yourself for it? What I put here is a reiteration of what I've already told you over the last, say, 25 minutes. I think I have another 5-6 minutes to go before I complete. But if you stuck to this, and I can discuss this in person with anybody who is earnest, who wants to do this, I'm willing to give you time. I'll put up my mail ID also at the end of this session. How do I keep it disease-free? That's the only way you can convince the community, convince the children, the mothers, of course, then the fathers, the elders in the village. How do I make them understand that they must go away from bore wells, which is giving them arsenic and fluoride and nitrate and iron? In the Gangetic Basin, if I stopped borewell use, there is no arsenic. Go to Balia or Banaras, arsenic is at 9, 10 ppm. Cancer, incidence of cancer coming from arsenic-related whatever infections is the highest in Balia in UP. Why? Because you are taking borewell water. Stop using borewell water, go to surface water management. You will see that there will be a disappearance, not a decline, of the incidence of such contamination. And of course, fertilizers and pesticides, as I've said before. Now, if I were to, so I'm saying to you, go away from borewells. If you really want good drought proofing, it also means that I do in my panchayat, the next panchayat is not listening and is not paying heed to things that we are doing here, it will not be complete. Every contiguous region, if I were to take, let us say, about 15, 20 square kilometers, 20 square kilometers is about 2,000 hectares, which is about 6,000, 7,000 acres, which means about 2 panchayats, right? Gram panchayats, I'm saying, has to do it together. The community has to be with you, the administration, local administration, the Zilla Parishad, as well as people who understand watershed and watershed management have to be part of it. And then you talk and reason with people. You communicate with them, tell them of the damage that is coming their way because they are not doing certain things. And that takes you to having them understand it with dashboards. How do I give them simple placards and posters, not slogans alone, but things that they can understand? Because of this, this is happening, and therefore the drought has got worse this year for us, right? You saw that one of those slides I put up in the beginning. In just the last 10 years, every year we have had at least four different zones which has had a drought. I mean, drought is not like across the country. It happens in different areas depending upon the monsoon and its quirks. Even a 1 degree shift in the monsoon can impact vast tracts of land on the quantum of water it gets or it does not get. And that is one of the challenges of the monsoon, while it is a great blessing for India. So how do I do all of these things in a way that I get participatory processes with the women, with the young men there? How do I ensure that they don't go out of their villages to cities for a job? In many villages, the profile today is like the war zone villages. Only the old and the very young are left. The earning members of the family are in the cities. How do I change that? That's part of, if you ask me, that's part of the challenge of drought mitigation and management of disasters of that kind. And here is, you know what this is, and I'm again stating it in order that we understand that even the panchayat has to do these things. The panchayat has to build the corpus. Panchayat has a way of getting revenues from each of the families in a village. How do they create? Therefore, if I am a very committed and capable sarpanch, I will know how to produce such things. I remember east of Bhopal towards Hoshangabad district, I used to work with one panchayat person, Munir Khan or somebody like that, wonderful guy. And he had not studied beyond some class 9, but his understanding of things was so sharp that he would take initiatives which even the government will sometimes disapprove of. And that is what you need. You need people who are capable of taking decisions. This is another one. The government must not provide relief. Doles will not help. If you help yourself and I will help you should be the, like Benjamin Franklin, self-help is the best help. How do I get to such a point at each of these panchayats? I don't know, but I am sharing this in order that people will reflect upon it, think about it, if you are people working in the water domain. Here is, constantly I keep saying, ecological efficiency is value for money. If I don't tell you about value for money, if you're a farmer, you are not going to listen to me. If you need buy-in from them, you need to make them also understand the cost of not doing. That is, this damage will happen if you do not do this, this, and this. That cost of not doing has to be put up in little posters, simple posters, telling messages at every level in every public building and in various other ways. It could be that you're using SMS because most of them still use the old phone, the keypad phone. But if there is a way of going beyond SMS into WhatsApp messages and such within the village, and if there are ways of communicating with farmers in a way that they don't have to use languages because people are not literate, even better. And I'm sure today in a country of such wonderful IT expertise, these things are possible. And communicate, and this. I keep saying these are the only 3 priorities. And if you look at it again, I'm reiterating this panchayat corpus, and that is what will be a critical part of this template for action if you really want to mitigate droughts. Well, we are just the last one. Redefine the economy, I'm saying. Redefine is, look at these 4 things that I put here, which is way beyond, if you ask me, droughts itself. First, we put so much money into cities at the complete neglect, I would say, if you, without wanting to be controversial on it, of our villages, right? 7% of our water is urban wastewater. 80% of the demand for water is agriculture. 13%, as you saw in that pie chart, is what? Is industrial water use. 13%. 7% is urban water use. All your STPs, your apartments and your commercial buildings, IT parks, etc. is just 7%. Akash Deep is going to speak and he is certifying green buildings. And what are these green buildings doing with 7% of the water? Where is this 80%? Right? And if we are resigned to accepting as the World Bank and others are telling us, and Professor Narayan, I'm sure, is one of my, he will endorse this. We should not accept the fact that urbanization is an inevitability. Why is that accepted in this country? We are fortunately still at $3 trillion. China went on a rampage. They are at $18 trillion. The United States, anyway, did all that in post-war time, and they are at $20 trillion, remaining the same more or less. But China, who were at the same levels as us in 1990, at some $200 billion, have gone to 18 trillion. The devastation of their natural resources is visible for anybody who goes to China or reads reports on China and its groundwater status or whatever its status. The only two things that matter for a nation are, in the order of priority, soil and water. Soil is the only asset of a nation. And if you degrade soils with manufacturing as, for example, an emphasis, you are not going to build a sustainable and a sustaining future for, if you are a statesman politician and not just a politician looking for the next election. So we have to stop thinking about GDP. We have to start thinking about manufacturing, but at a level where we understand the strengths of each of our zones. Thanks to our Varna system, there are wonderful skills and craftsmanship that exist in different places, which can be connected to GDP in certain ways, but not in the ways that they are defining manufacturing today. Look at semiconductors and your cars. Semiconductors are not available the last, say, 2 years because China is not producing them. And why is China not producing it? Because they don't have the grade of water that they need, which is available at about 3,500 to 4,000 meters. They are degraded in the last 20 years to a point where they are not able to find more of it. Now, Joe Biden is saying that he will grow semiconductors there with Intel and another company. But is this what we want to do? Is this the economy that we want India to be building as a superpower? Return to the riches of this land. This is one rare land where we have had so much knowledge. Why are we not listening to our past? Thank you. I don't want to say any more. Thank you so much for listening to me. Thank you once again, Professor Narayan. I think I'm at about, at 46, about 32 minutes I've taken. I'd set an alarm for 25 and have taken another 6-7 minutes.
It's
That's
good.
all I have to share.
It's good. Your presentation is very informative, and for the panchayats, at least in some states like West Bengal or Chhattisgarh and Bihar, are very useful. Because these people I would like to talk with the secretaries of these states that you have shared. We will share with them. And generally, you see, it's a practice of Society for Empowerment that whenever we do this kind of webinar, which we think that it will have an impact on people, common man, then we share it with the government of India. And whenever they feel that they need to discuss, then we discuss it in formulation of policy also. So this is your presentation is of that importance. I think that we will definitely get some call from the government to share our views on this subject. It's very informative, a very useful discussion. Now we have another expert, Mr. Akash Deep. He is from GRIHA. So I will request him to make his presentation.
Sure.
Thank you, sir. It's a pleasure listening to both so senior sirs from the industry and always learning from, as sir said at the last, our ancestors' knowledge is what makes us different and what we have as sustainable practices with us. Just let me know if the screen is visible.
Not yet. They have to allow it once you upload.
Yes. So is it visible now?
Yes, please.
Thank you. So what I would be presenting today is kind of a response to the disasters which India has seen in the past years. It's a how the built environment where we stay, where we use, whether it's a village, whether it's a semi-urban area or an urban area, how they can be make resilient to such disasters, including drought, flooding, and as and Alliance has said, both man-made and natural disasters. Basically, how sustainability, how these practices which we used to have in our ancestral time, how uh, bringing back that knowledge with the modern technology can actually help us fill this gap. Basically, we all know climate change is happening. We all know that the droughts, the famines, the flooding, the cyclones, these are all result of the climate change which is happening across the globe. There is a major challenge. If you see across the various effects of climate change, all of them are linked to somewhere to water, basically, whether it's coastal increase of the rise of the water levels, or increase in heat because of lack of green areas and water spaces in the urban areas, was in excess of limited resources, obviously resource water being a resource, major challenge of not having that resource, fresh water availability, all these food growing, availability of food productivity of these water intensive food products. So all these are linked to the climate change activities which we are doing across the globe. And what this climate change actually means is that, sorry, yes, as I was saying, it is just running around. So we all know that today that we have built cities, especially if we could talk about India, we have built cities across our topography, which have been flooded, which have seen floods either at any given point of time. Whether it's you take Jammu, that's a hilly region. You'd go into Rajasthan, Udaipur, that was last year. That's a desert region. Delhi, Gurgaon, a central plains, but you get floods before the rain comes as well. You go into the coastal regions of Bengal, you go into the coastal region of Orissa, Mumbai, Bhopal, Center Plains, Tamil Nadu, Chennai. So we have built such cities or urban centers which are flooded because of our ill practices, or because of our what I'll say is not following our ancestral knowledge. I'll say because all these urban techniques which we were following, our states, our cities which were built in by our ancestors, they had these design features inbuilt in their whole planning that takes care of these disasters as such. Whether it's Rajasthan, as I was mentioning, you have these beautiful Bawris which takes care of water scarcity in a very interesting ways in a very scarce region of the country, basically. Similarly, when you go into the Bengal side, where such ponds have been created, Bangalore, the city of lakes, have lost all the lakes in the sake of development, and so is this tale of all cities. And now we are actually seeing floods and droughts just into the next two cities and Maharashtra, I think so. If we remember the last to last year in the COVID times, in the same state, one city is having a flood, and at the same time, the other city in the same state is having a drought. That is the irony of the current designing and the current city planning which we have actually built in. So, at the international level, we all know that we are a force to reckon, and everybody is looking up front to India as a developing nation. What we are now doing, and uh, across the globe, there have been multiple initiatives to curb climate change with the Paris Agreement, the Conference of Parties. Just to brief on the Paris Agreement, as we all know that the Paris Agreement, the intent was to keep the rise in temperature below 2 degrees or 1.5 degrees by 2030. But interestingly, we all have achieved this rise this year itself, as announced by UN. So, on the growing trends of carbon emissions, the disasters which we are seeing now, it will be much more in intensities in the next decade or next years to come, and basically because we have surpassed our kind of a we have brought the disasters close to us by doing what we are doing right now, or the trends which we are following right now. Uh, what it means in generally, this is the temperature rise on the global level, and which countries have performed on the global levels of sustainable implementation. So if you see India, most of the countries, I think so, in the Paris Agreement, we are falling above major cities are falling, countries are falling than 4 degrees change by 2030. And as Hariharan sir was also mentioning, even a 1 degree change will actually make a huge impact in all our climate modeling or our climate predictions. They will not work at all in what data which we have gathered till date, or if we are using that data to predict how these cities will actually come up with basically. And what this numbers actually means is this. So right now, this is already what we have achieved. The global temperature rise has already been to 1.5 degrees Celsius as in 2023, which was the goal of 2030. But with the current trends, this is what we are moving our planet Earth to in 2030. Uh, a red hot ball of I don't know what, we will not be remaining hopefully by then. That's the mass what we see, red planet basically. And the activities which we do in the sake of development, in the sake of whatever we are trying to do right now, is not actually resulting in our favor. So, what is climate resilience initiatives which India has taken, and how we are trying to do something at the country level? India has announced its National Action for Climate Change, which has various themes on energy efficiency, water efficiency. There are various missions which have been launched, solar missions. Interestingly, what you see is across the globe a major dependency or major pattern of major implementation of policies or enhancements have happened into the energy sector. Somehow, the last decade has been for the energy, and water has actually been out of the whole policy making and out of the whole importance across the globe and the center level. And now we are actually seeing the wrath of not giving water its importance. Interestingly, energy is a comfort requirement, and water is life. But the last 10 years do not say the same. And that's why the current challenge of the next decade or the next 20 years is providing water to all, which is a much bigger challenge than what we see as an energy comfort requirements basically. We all know this, that our cities have this is the 2015 flood of Mumbai, and Mumbai has seen these images much on a regular basis, year after year. But still, we are every year at the end, it's we just say it's just 1 month, it's just 15 days, let's get over it and come back to our lives, which is a sad story which should not happen basically. And interestingly, as I was mentioning, when we go to the projects on and we discuss with them rainwater management, because in India specifically, rain is kind of a blessing, and rain is uh, kind of a bad thing for us also. So if you manage it properly, it is kind of a heaven for us. But currently, it is the most mismanaged resource which our country is doing, and that's why it creates a havoc across the country. Uh, One of the ways of actually achieving climate resilience in cities or any of the neighborhood or village level, it has two prolonged approach. One is adaptation, and another one is mitigation. And when you merge these two things together, you get the resilience part inbuilt into the built environment and the city environment itself. Uh, the more adaptive the city growth or city designing is to these requirements, the buildings and the projects would be more resilient basically. Whether it's energy, whether it's water, whether it's waste, whether it's carbon, everything is all around. If we have sustainable approach towards something, many other times it's said that okay, I have a green building, I have a green certified building, what does it matter how I have achieved it? Interestingly, it's an old saying, the process is very important how you are achieving that last goal. Obviously, if a process is green, sustainable, the end result will be sustainable. But if the process is not sustainable, it might end up looking green but not green sustainability basically. So the climate resilience in the built environment will actually help in a longer way on whether it's a global energy requirements, whether it's global water reductions or the global resources reduction, because these resilience infrastructure which you invest now will help you actually save a lot on the longer runs. This I'll just skip it. Now this is we venture into the water story. This is what our story is. Uh, we have everything in extremes in our country. whether it's too little, whether it's too dirty, whether it's too much or too many. So everything revolves around the last segment of too many. Whether it's climate, whether it's water, we have everything in extremes. We lack to find a common or the central path, which is a balanced path basically, and that's where the sustainability lies. It's the balance between what we have and what we use, as Narayan sir also said, as Gandhiji also said, the difference between need and greed is the balance between both of them, and that's what is lacking in our country right now. As Hariharan sir also said, that we are already in the water stress level. Our country has already reached that level, and we are fast moving towards water scarcity as well. And we all know that the first city of the world, the Cape Town, was the first city to run out of water, literally out of water in 20, I think 19, and uh, much before that, I think so. And in India also, we have experienced the first city to run out of water. That was Chennai in 2019, basically. And uh, as per the current growth patterns and current water consumption patterns in the urban scenarios, we will have more and more numbers of such cities in our country, water stressed cities in our countries, which run out of water during the summer months, basically. Uh, as we said, diversity in India. What you say in India is opposite is also true for us, basically. Whether it's too much, too less, too dirty, or too clean. One of the best thing which we were discussing, India, as per its current location on the global landmass scenario, rain is one kind of a boon, if managed properly, can save us from lots of drought management, and if done properly, it can help us prevent lots of floods also. uh, uh, what we have seen in the implementation of the process across the globe itself, across the country itself, is that uh, the systems which we design, rainwater harvesting systems, the storage and reuse system, stormwater management systems, people or the policies uh, are there in place just to make these systems uh, stay. They are not designed, they are not implemented for basically working patterns. As sir was mentioning, the intensities of rain have increased drastically in the last 10 years. Now, interestingly, if you go and as you would be working in the built environment scenario, if you go and ask how these systems are designed, still till date people use average rainfall values for designing rain harvesting systems. uh, for example, a city like Delhi, the average rainfall values of an hour is 40 mm, and what you receive in an hour nowadays is 110 mm. Obviously you will have flooding, your system will not work. There's hell lot of common sense. You don't require common sense also in this basic mathematics, but still we are following those old practices of designing systems on uh, such numbers which will not work for our country. uh, as I was mentioning, bore wells, implementation of recharging systems through bore well, or having bore wells to extract water, one of the malpractices which our country has. Because uh, if you see, a bore recharge system is good as a practice, but how we use it without maintenance, that is one of the challenge. And a very interesting example from my own colony, the rainwater harvesting system which we do, you have the filter media, you have the bore well recharge at the bottom of it. After 2 or 3 rains, it's basically a sieve. It gets stuck, it gets clogs. You need to get out all the filter, clean it, and put it back. And tell me, as a user of a building, as a user of a city, how many times have you seen this cleaning of filters happening and the sand going back? And what happens is, the cleaner or the society cleaner comes, and uh, he takes out all the filter media and puts it out and says, sir, the filter media is out, now the rainwater is going very fast inside the groundwater, without knowing what that sand filter was there for. Basically, the transition of knowledge is not there. We design technically, the person who is using it, person who is maintaining it, does not know how to maintain it. And at the end of the day, what you see is a major challenge in using of systems, even if they are green systems, in ill-mannered way, resulting in unsustainable practices at the end of the day. How many of us have a challenge of actually switching off light and opening the curtain work? We don't have that in our somehow DNA, in the newer generation at least. we end up, okay, put the curtains, we don't want daylight, switch on the light and work. That's the lifestyle challenges which we are facing, which are actually increasing the challenges with our water management across water and energy management across the country. So what we do is GRIHA has a rating body which evaluates you and gives you a rating, and it is recognized by government as a national body rating body for green buildings in our country. Uh, Similarly, on the carbon footprint side, as we all know, we have a 2070 target, and interestingly, most of us either would be in our old ages or would have gone and buried for this 2070 target of net carbon zero. Interestingly, this carbon net zero is basically for the younger generation who is there in the right now in their schooling, and they do not know even ABCD of, they are not taught about sustainability in their schools, and that's what the challenge which we face. So carbon mitigation is very important when we talk about waters. Uh, I'll run through to a case study, very interesting case study in the region of Maharashtra. This is basically Govardhan Eco Village and ESCON campus, which has been rated and developed. Basically, what they have done is they have designed the whole campus in terms of a cyclic, that's called a symbiotic design, which is basically a cyclic design, circular economy, what we talk about nowadays. When you talk about sustainability, is all about cyclic in nature, which means a waste, there's no waste actually. A byproduct of one cycle is actually a resource for the other cycle, and this is a very interesting campus. Initially, when this was not designed and built in this nature, this area had a major drought prone area. This site is in the major drought prone area in the Thane region of Maharashtra, and they were having a major water stress levels throughout the years. And once this system or once this project was designed, not just this project, but near around surrounding villages have also felt a better water management in terms of the water tables, in terms of the availability of resources, not just in their own site. So anything and everything which we do in our site, it is not affecting us, it is also affecting all around us. That has to be known and understood when we are doing any other projects. So I'll just this is a very interesting and big site. It is located at the Ghats of the you have the Western Ghats towards the leeward side, towards the windward side of the monsoon side, towards the lake. So it receives heavy rainfalls because of the Western Ghats, but because of the Ghats, the runoff from the site was very huge, and because of there was no holding capacities around it, the water was not being recharged properly, and the water table was decreasing drastically because of extraction of because of agriculture and other reasons. So what you see interestingly is the building materials over there was also very sustainable. These are all mud blocks made from the site. So interesting about this site is uh, other than human beings, nothing goes in, nothing comes out. Whether it's water, whether it's energy, whether it's building material, all is on the site, of the site, from the site. What they have done is they did a hydrogeological study, and being a Deccan Plateau site, it's very important to know where these available of availability of fishes or the recharging of percolation rate of the soils is good. So what they did was, if you see the first water holding site, it is located at the Ghats of the Western Ghats. So all the water which comes down from the Ghats is actually collected in the three major water bodies. Post which, out of this, one water body is actually located where you have those fissures available in the Deccan Plateau. So the water goes without any bore, and if you have a good holding capacity, the water percolates to the ground very interestingly. It has inculcated the older stormwater channels, not the cement ones which we use nowadays, which have no capacities of holding and recharging at all. So they have gone back to the swales designing in the whole campus. It's a huge campus, so all the agriculture produce which is there, that is used for feeding within the campus itself. uh, they have actually there are no air conditioning. You can go and live there. It's all naturally ventilated, and even in summers you'll feel that you need a duvet to stay in there. It's a mud block construction, so that's the and these are the ancestral materials, which are local materials, which help us achieve sustainability at a longer run. So that's the water body which I was referring to. It has water holding capacities of all the Western Ghats runoff. If you see in the photograph, if it's visible, it's actually lined from the bottom. So that makes sure that the water doesn't percolate at the first instant of collection. It runs through the whole site, and it goes to the various collection ponds, where it goes then it recharges the groundwater, and making sure that the water is available in the drought, in the harsh summer time as well. Very interesting campus in itself, and I'll close on that. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Uh, you have made a very good presentation, Akash Deepji, and very interesting thing which you suggested that the response of younger generation is different from our generation, from the older generation. But at the same time, you talked about the traditional knowledge of disaster, of handling disaster. These are the two contradictions which you made in your presentation, but both of them are very good because there is some gap in using the traditional knowledge of mitigating the disaster. And then the second point, which you said that the younger generation are not aware of uh, how to manage the situation of a disaster. So that is equally important. You have given a very good example of use of light by uh, taking out that the screen or the parda. So that is very very interesting, and this needs to be highlighted in your study and in the policy of the government also.
Sure.
So these two are very interesting, which I found it, and the people will.
Yeah. Professor
Professor,
Narayan, can I add to that to respond to
please.
what Akashdeep presented? I'll take a
Yes, yes,
minute or
please.
two.
No,
See,
no, you can take 5 minutes. No problem.
sure, wonderful. Thank you. At one point you said there is a reasonable, more than apprehension sort of situation on how we will hit more than 1.5 degrees by 2030, right? And we know the clear nexus between carbon emissions and global warming, right? Having said that, I was looking at the 2021 and 2022 figures of carbon emission. 4.6 billion tons India has been achieving, if I want to use the word achieving, in these 2 years. We don't have data for 22, 23, and we have got 7 more years to go to 2030. That's 45 to 50 billion tons. And what is India committing to? 1 billion tons by 2030 of carbon emission reduction against this 50 billion tons, right? Now, how are we going to ever achieve it? This is one way of looking at it. The other is, look at what you said about the NAPCC, or of the, what did you call it? This, I think you call it the Cities Assessment Framework.
CSAF.
Right. Now, there, number one is they're talking only cities, which is 7% of the water, right?
Yes.
However, even with that, if I am doing a city, if I take, say, 1 million liters, just 1 million liters per day of a certain place, any building that you take, or something at the city level, it translates, and I can show you how, to about 6,000 tons of carbon emission reduction. 6,000 tons for every 1 mlpd, right? If you are doing buildings like that, which is at 1 mlpd, tell me about it. IGBC, of which I am here at Bangalore, and I've been with it for 20 years, we have done about 900 million square feet only here in Bangalore. About 10% of that 9 billion square feet that IGBC has done in India. Now, I'm finding that in many of these projects, I keep telling them, I say, if you can demonstrate to me with an MNV protocol, measurement and verification, that you have achieved at 1 mlpd for 2 years, let us say, I will ensure that you get a carbon credit certification also. India, very soon, as you know, Akashdeep, is moving towards a carbon credit market of its own in the next 3 months or so. I think they will announce it. The Prime Minister has already cleared it, I hear. The other point I wanted to tell you is, you said it is the most mismanaged water as the resource in India. You're right about that, while it's also the most scarce. Now, how do you now? You took Cape Town as an example. I keep telling people Cape Town is a media managed story. Why? Cape Town is 3.5 million people. I will take Jaipur as an example, which is receiving 450 mm rainfall. If Cape Town receives 600 mm rainfall, right? The closest example. Now, Jaipur has got 4.5 million people. Cape Town has got 3.5 million people. You can check out the data if you like. Now, the other thing I find is Jaipur has, as a geographic spread, 450 square kilometers for 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 what? For 4.5 million people, 1 million more. And still they have only 450 square kilometers, while Cape Town has got 600 square kilometers. Where has Cape Town got a problem? Did you ever hear Jaipur ever talking of a water crisis? And why is that? Go back to your 1,000 years and what Professor Narayan also spoke about, you spoke about. Jaipur is a city of lakes, and not today. It goes back to the 11th century when they first began harvesting water. In every home, they do it. A biography of Gandhi written by Ramchandra Guha talks about how in 1870, 1875, 80, when Gandhi was a young boy at some 11 or 12 years, he lived in a house which was already 120 years old. His grandfather was a diwan of Porbandar. And he says that the husbanding of water in that home was something that Gandhi knew, every child knew in the place. Even today in Kathiawad, or you go to western districts of Bamar and Jaisalmer in Rajasthan, ghar ghar pe वैसे बच्चे बच्चे will know about how to harvest water. So what is happening? Water literacy to water availability of water, it's completely inversely proportionate. I thought I must mention these things to you in response to whatever talked about. Let me give you another example. Bangalore, we are about 700 square kilometers. We are 12 million people. 700 square kilometers. That is 70,000 hectares. 1 hectare is 10 million liters of rainwater at 1 meter only. We also get about 1.2 meter rainfall here. That's 700 billion liters. Of that, even if I remove, say, 30% and say I will hold only about 500 billion, our entire water demand in Bangalore is only 730 billion liters for the year. 70% of the water I will achieve, therefore. Why? This is what mismanagement is about, like you said. Over to you, Professor Narayan.
It's okay. Thank you. Both of you
Thank you,
make
sir.
very,
Yeah.
very good presentation, very lively presentation, very
Yeah,
informative presentation.
yeah, yeah.
And I hope that in near future we will also have such kind lively discussions, which will have a policy bearing also. And
True, sir.
that is the efforts that we are trying to make to bring to realize the development developmental issues and to solve it, to resolve it with Gandhian
Yes,
philosophy and Gandhian vision.
right.
That's what our aim, and we are trying to that. And today's discussion is close to Gandhian vision and Gandhian things. When we talk about, when Professor Hariharan talked about the panchayat, water literacy, panchayat, water, say, component, all that, that is what Gandhiji used to thought of. So we are there. We are always here to welcome all of you, whoever is interested to work with us and to
Sir,
share our ideas. Can now,
yes, sir.
is
Yeah,
there
we have some
question
few
any?
interesting questions here for Professor, both our panelists,
Yes, yeah,
and most of them are for Dr. Hariharan sir. I'm just putting up
yes,
on the screen.
Sure.
please. This question
Um,
is for Professor Hariharan.
yes.
Scientific
Yeah.
discovery
Yeah.
shows a new phenomenon. Flash
Yes.
drought. What must be early warning systems and mitigation measures to tackle the emerging challenge?
Sure. Namaskar, Gopalji. To the rest of you, I must tell you, he's himself a wonderfully inspiring water expert. Someday, Professor Narayan, you must invite him to speak. He is not just
Oh,
passionate, but he brings a great deal of capability and experience in this area. Gopalji, I must only say yes. Now, the question is, well, in a sense, begging for an answer because when we talk of these completely unexpected droughts, we are still talking about preparedness. We are still talking about how we take the tehsil or the block, or whether it's a mandal or even the village itself, the gram panchayat itself, we have to see that we have prepared them for it. First, we have to anticipate it. Any copybook management set of directions that you and I know of from the urban side has to be employed in such situations. If you ask me on a flash drought, like a flash flood, I will only say that we have to look at what happened in the last 10 years, anticipate something for the next 3 years. If I start, for example, if I were to look for on the web for what are the odds of drought occurrence in, say, certain districts or
आधा
certain
घंटा और
areas, like say Vidarbha, or or for instance Ramnad in Tamil Nadu, I will not find anybody giving me any sensible projection for the next 5-7 years to 2030. How do I secure such things at the level of the micro region? When I say micro region, I'm talking of maybe 20 square kilometers, maybe 50 square kilometers. If I were to say, I take a cluster of say 2, 3, 4 gram panchayats. That's all I can say. Gopalji, you are an expert yourself. I don't want to add any more just now.
Please, I need a mobile number of Gopalji so that I can talk
Yeah.
to him.
Yes,
can-
I will enable that, Professor Narayan. I'll enable that. Wonderful person to speak to. Extremely compelling in his views and in the way he understands the subject. I will connect you.
Okay, thank you.
Back
Sir,
to you, Subhashji. Any other questions? Or
we have another
thoughts?
question for Dr. Hariharan, sir. Is there?
All right.
Thank you, sir.
Yes.
I have one question. You mentioned not to use groundwater, but surface water is heavily contaminated nowadays, especially by
Yeah.
fertilizers, open defecation, etc. How we can control it?
Yeah.
This is question
Namaskar to
for
you, Mustaqim. I'll put it like this to you. If I were to, let's say, go back to the same example of a village. Let's say you decide where in that place, given the basic contours of the land and given the common lands that the panchayat owns, or something that that belongs, let us say, to the forest department, the Van Vibhag, as well as cultivable land. Then you say to yourself, this is some located area where I will create a tank or a talab. For 1,000 years, people have known how to keep the talab protected from defecation to everything else you talked about. And we don't need to teach or tell villagers. They have infinite wisdom when it comes to keeping water clean. In fact, a lot of our festivals in villages are around talabs and the importance of water. Water has always been deified in this country, Mustaqim. So I don't see that your the at least the question seems to suggest that there is what do you call it, pollution or contamination of such water bodies. Go across to say Rajasthan, east of Rajasthan, or you can go even further into the west of Rajasthan. Go to some parts of Nadia district. Professor Narayan was talking about Bengal and Bihar. You go to due north of Kolkata. If you were to go into Nadia and some other districts, you'll see such practices even to this day, right? And there is always a Devi or a Mata which protects the lake and such things. And these are traditions that people didn't create today. I will leave it there, Mustaqim. It is not a challenge of external contamination. It's a question of how we go back to communication, return the young generation to the knowledge and wisdom of their forefathers, of the village Buddha, who will be their grandfather today. Over to you, Subhashji.
thank you. Thank you very much.
Sir, if I may ask extend the same question to sir on the same lines, on the surface water which you were discussing actually. Now, interestingly, when we talk about our villages or suburban areas, semi-urban areas, one of the challenges which it's not about these surfaces being not these areas we are not being protected or not. It's more of the challenge of their aspiration to have a lifestyle because of which the challenge occurs. They are they are aware of preserving these systems. It's not about not preserving these systems. It's about aspiring to become a so-called urban dweller and have those so-called comforts in the village areas, and that's what is creating a chaos in our villages. having a glass building, having air conditioning where it is not required, having
All
logical,
that I know. Yeah,
illogical
sure.
copy pasting of systems, basically.
Absolutely. Illogical is the word. Yeah. Over to you, Subhashji.
Sir, we have a important question. Means from Society for Empowerment side. We have a questions. In the meantime, important this Nirmala Gowda has referred important point on semiconductor that you have
Correct.
referred. So
Yes.
on that
True.
aspect, you have mentioned the example of China, that there is some water crisis was there. So how they
Correct.
are correlated? We just want to know on that.
Well, my only the reason for my taking it up, and thank you, Nirmala, for bringing this up, is that India should not go this way of encouraging manufacturing of a kind that China has done in the last, say, 20 years. Fortunately for us, even if I'm sounding a little perverse on it, we have enough lessons that China has offered us on on what we should not be doing. And let's understand one thing: any activity, whatever you might want to do, I might want to do, India might want to do, is centrally dependent on water. You take every industrial estate in the country. Why is it placed close to water abundance? Show me an industrial estate where there is no water. Go to Sri City. Why is it being placed north of, uh, of Chennai, even if it is on the other side of the border? Why is Ennore, traditionally, if I go back 50, 60 years, the industrial zone in Chennai? Why? Go to Maharashtra, go to all the MIDCs. Why is it that they are in areas where there is water abundance? Water is, and they will never tell you so. No minister of industry or ministry of industry, state or union level, will tell you that they have gone and located this here because of water. And I can give you multiple other examples. Therefore, I'm saying India should not, if Joe Biden wants to go and do those Intel chips, I mean, allow Intel to do it in the United States, let him do it. Why did smartly the United States not do in 97, 98? Why did they get Intel to go and outsource it in China? Because they knew the challenge. The Americans are smart enough to know the damage that it can do to destroy water ecosystems at 3 to 3.5 kilometers below water. That grade of what, in fact, what China is doing to say Congo today, your mobile cannot work if Congo did not exist. So the story is more sinister and deeper than we all understand. I'll leave it there. Thank you, Nirmala, for the question or the observation. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Hariharan and Akash Deepji. Hope sometime we will meet again
We will.
and have a lovely discussion.
Professor Narayan, I must tell you that there are some wonderful other participants here, as I can see now. They're all people who come from a fraternity of working on water. They and beyond transactional approaches to water. They're all doing it on a non-profit mode. Here is Dr. Raval, for instance, another amazing limnologist and scientist on water, very humble person. There are many of them who have joined today thanks to our sharing the invite with these people. Neil Matthews, for instance, is another inspiring young man. He must be what about? He's now maybe 60 or so, maybe a little on the right side of the 60s. And he has done a house where not 1 liter of water for the last 2 years he has taken from the outside. Yes, but this is Dr. Rajaram, for instance. Look at what he is echoing your thoughts, Professor Narayan. Gram Swaraj that Gandhi taught us.
Yes.
We forgot it somewhere. Dr. Rajaram is another dear friend. He turned 75 about 5 weeks ago. He lives in Chicago and has lived there for the last 50 plus years. Hugely committed man. He has written some 7 to 8 titles. You must invite him one of these days, Professor Narayan, to speak to your people on. He talks on the ethics of sustainability and engineering, for example. He also he's one of these eminent experts. I'll say a doyen of water management. He's done large projects in the United States. He's written over 60 to 70 papers and so on. Very distinguished person, Dr. Rajesh. So there are many people like that here, Professor Narayan, who are listening to this conversation today. I'm privileged to know all of these people. as not just co-travelers, but as friends also. So I will invite you. I mean, I will certainly connect you, Professor Narayan and
Please,
Subhashji,
please,
to all of these people.
I shall remain thankful to you if you kindly forward their mobile number and email ID so that I can
I certainly
invite them and
sure.
I can talk to them.
Yes,
Okay.
I shall do
Thank
that.
you.
I
Thank you
shall
very
do
much.
that.
Thank
And
you,
what
sir.
I
Thank
liked
you so much.
most, Professor Narayan, of what you're saying is, and this is important for personally for me and for many professionals who are here, that conversations of these kinds you are taking to see if you can uh, convert them into policy frameworks that state or central governments will listen to. And that is something I look forward to with future engagements with you, Professor Narayan. We need the government to work on certain things.
That's what
Well, communication.
I'm trying.
Thank you.
Yes, that's the only thing that Society for Empowerment is doing. We are providing a platform to government also. That you see, the experts are here, what they feel, and the common
Right.
man is also here, what they feel. If you know about them only, then empowerment in true sense will come. Otherwise, empowerment is it will always remain in vacuum. So we are playing a balancing force to
Thank you.
empower the government through policy and through real life. So that's what we are
Wonderful.
trying, and
All
use
of
this
us
is
here,
good
many
discussion.
of my other
We can
members of the Wow Action Forum who have joined this meeting today, fortunately, we will welcome every such intervention from you where you can help us to help the government shape certain policy frameworks, if we can do that. Right?
Thank you. Thanks for. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you,
definitely.
Professor.
It was
Okay.
an enriching
Oh,
discussion.
thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you
sir.
very much.